everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where, for the 100th time, we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies, recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Madeline.
I'm Julian.
And I'm Emilio. The three of us are still colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us and what has brought us together, but movies are what continue to keep us together, talking at the end of the night. So we've created some order to this ongoing trend by recording these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 unique guidelines for engagement.
You can email us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. Seriously, we would love to hear from you, and you can also follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok for updates, highlights, clips, and other visual supplements to the audio we record at the handle Sleepless Cinematic Pod. And you can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter at sleeplesscinematicpod.substack.com to get even more insights, recapped thoughts, and musings about our conversations and other related Sleepless Cinematic goings on.
In addition to these main episodes, we record and release bonus one-off episodes as we see fit. And while we do this, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, forgoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, we mark our 100th episode with a bonus episode to discuss a film that has some significance to the origins of our podcast, Sleepless in Seattle. Released in 1993, written and directed by Nora Ephron and starring Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan as a man and woman separated by thousands of miles, but whose lives are destined to be romantically intertwined when they mutually become aware of each other's existence. After we dig into this film, we'll mention some of our favorite moments and memories of the past 100 episodes and shout out some of the people that have made this possible.
Yeah, and this is the moment where we finally acknowledge maybe the title most likely to be confused with our own podcast.
That's true.
Yeah.
There is a lot of phonetic similarity there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was an inspiration.
Totally.
Yes.
A welcome one. I
Yeah.
feel like, should we mention what the other possible title we had for this?
I
it's-
think if there's ever a time to do it, now is the time.
It's
Because
just-
we
yeah.
were between this and one other for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that other one was the first one to come up, which was Cinema Nocturne.
Yes, absolutely. Which I feel
still think is good.
totally. In retrospect, though, I feel like what we settled on feels a little more, I guess, in keeping with some of the energy that I think we carry
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was my best friend who was like, well, it does, though, sound like this is a podcast all about Sleepless in Seattle.
So for today,
so
that's
for
what it'll
today, that is partially
Yeah.
true.
be. And speaking of potential confusions, right? We are talking Sleepless in Seattle today, which I would say is not to be confused with a film which is kind of like the inverse of this movie, which is the also beloved rom-com from the 90s, While You Were Sleeping.
That's true.
This stars Sandra Bullock and also
Bill
Bill
Pullman.
Yeah.
Yes. Sleepless in Seattle, briefly a Chicago movie.
Yeah.
While You Were Sleeping, firmly planted in Chicago. Different films, though. I think they're both delightful in their own ways.
Yeah, and so, well, talking about the locations accessed in Sleepless in Seattle and the fact that it is a romantic comedy from the early 1990s, the status of some characters in this film that takes place predominantly in Seattle means that it should not be confused with another film from around the same time set in Seattle,
Oh, I know what this is.
Singles.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
Cameron Crowe's film from 1992 technically came before Sleepless in Seattle.
Yeah.
When it comes to conveying the character of a city, I think that Singles goes a little further in portraying Seattle, which is no slight on Sleepless in Seattle, but if you want an impression of that city at that time, Singles goes a little bit further. But yes, this is the 1992 rom-com, often remembered as a notable point in the prominence of grunge in music because of its soundtrack.
Do you think Sam is a fan of Citizen Dick?
No.
I don't think so either.
No.
He's a little straight-laced.
There's not a hint of grunge in Sleepless in Seattle.
That's very true.
Despite the time. But
Do you think Jonah will grow up to appreciate Citizen Dick?
that's an interesting question.
There we go.
Well, do you think, though, that they're going to be staying in Seattle? Because Meg Ryan says she doesn't want to move to Seattle.
Yeah,
You know,
this is
they
a good
have,
point.
they have several cities to choose from.
There could be new memories made back in Chicago, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just saying, and that's a nice city.
If you're thinking about the relationship status of Sam and Annie in Sleepless in Seattle, they're, one of them is single for most of the movie, but the other one's only single for seems like a few
20
minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
So there's
However long it takes to get from that restaurant to the Empire State Building.
yeah, so there's maybe a not realistically elapsed window where
Single.
they are single. Further reason for non-confusion.
Yeah, and this is a movie that makes a lot of reference to another classic film, and I think we'll talk a little bit about this later, but this film, Sleepless in Seattle, is not to be confused with An Affair to Remember.
Oh, of course.
Definitely.
The Cary Grant and Deborah Carr?
Right. I think it's Kerr, but yes.
It's
A
spelled
question,
Kerr,
yes.
but I think it might be pronounced Carr. I don't know.
Oh, boy.
It is an ongoing question.
It is.
It's not to be
In
confused.
the film and maybe elsewhere, yeah. Love it. That's all.
Yeah. I guess we haven't said all that much about the sleepless element of that end. For that reason, Sleepless in Seattle is not to be confused with Insomnia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neither
Yeah.
the Norwegian film from 1997 or the remake of it from 2002, directed by Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Sleepless in Seattle, decidedly not a film that leans into the sleeplessness very much.
You said Insomnia. I thought you were going to go, this is not to be confused with Sleepless. Dario Argento's
Oh, right.
Sleepless from
Yeah.
2001.
That's a very fair point. And speaking of films from 2001, it's also not to be confused with Serendipity.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Quite a bit of that in Sleepless in Seattle, but Serendipity, that's a movie with John Cusack and Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah. Have you seen that movie?
I have not.
Yeah.
Have you?
I have.
What do you think of it?
It's fine. It's cute. We'll get into it as we continue to roll out our thoughts about the movie that we're going to talk about today. There's some things that both movies get into that might not be my cup of chicken noodle soup.
Well, I think we know what we're talking about now. A lot of dancing around the edges here, but
Right.
What is Sleepless in Seattle about?
Okay. So Tom Hanks is living in Chicago with his son Jonah. Only his wife passes away. And he's hurting. So they move to Seattle for a fresh start. And it's raining there, I think. So Jonah calls into a radio show to ask for advice about his father, and women all over America tune in to hear Tom Hanks talk about how much he loved his wife. And Meg Ryan, who is recently engaged, hears him on the radio and becomes instantly obsessed with him. But then she's too proud to tell her fiance, Bill Pullman, that she's stalking Tom Hanks and that she's written him a letter. And Tom Hanks is too proud to entertain her proposal to meet him at the top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day. But Jonah goes to see her anyway. I forget why. And Tom Hanks follows behind. And oh, it's so amazing when he finds Jonah on the observation deck, because he doesn't even know that Meg Ryan has called off her engagement with Bill Pullman, who is not at all bitter. And you think that Tom Hanks and Jonah are just going to go down the elevator and never know that Meg Ryan is racing to get to them. And suddenly she gets to the Empire State Building and she finds Jonah's backpack just as they're coming up to get it. And he looks and they come out and he looks at her and he kind of just, they know, and then they hold hands. And it's
This sounds like a chick movie.
I would say so.
success.
Well done.
Thank you.
It took me way too long to realize what was going on.
I gave Julian a full warning.
Okay. Yes.
But I did want to try to make it a surprise for at least
It was great.
one of you.
I loved it. I was all for it.
100 episodes in, and I'm realizing we need to give each other more opportunities to flex our acting chops.
Thank you.
The most amount of acting that you'll see from me is just trying to read my notes. So that was
Doing
my
the intro.
Yes, but my hat is off to you. That was great.
Thank you. I mean, much like when we discussed Grease, I'm okay with being the person that has a lot of love and nostalgia for this movie at a table of people that may be slightly less positive on it. That is okay. I'm fine to fill that seat because this is a movie that I've seen many times in my life. This is a movie that my parents love and that I probably, as I said earlier, saw for the first time when I was like 8 and have rewatched a lot over the years and have rewatched like 4 times in the last 2 weeks, partly for preparation and partly because I love this movie and I find it instantly rewatchable. But that's me. I just want to make it clear that it's okay. I will be able to handle it when you guys have slightly less enthusiastic opinions.
Well, let me just quickly respond to that by saying I like this movie a lot, too.
I'm glad.
It's actually a relatively new arrival in my life, at least as something I've seen. I feel like I've known about it as long as I've been aware of movies, but I don't have the long-standing relationship with it that you do, Madeline. Mm-hmm. This is a unanimous episode for us. It may not fit in that place in a cycle connected to other movies, but we've all seen this before. But I'm definitely the one who saw this the most recently for the first time. It was only about 6 months ago that I first saw the movie, and I acknowledged it on this podcast at the time because, well, technically
it's a big moment.
It's a big moment, but also technically that viewing was for a prior episode of this podcast.
Right.
Which was, it's sad to mention what it was, but it was our tribute to Rob Reiner.
Right.
And also something that really endeared me to this appearance is the service that he did to the great dessert of tiramisu.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes. Cannot be stated enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
By
real contribution.
By shouting it out during his brief but consequential appearance. And I would have been, taking my hat off to it, which I'm literally doing,
cool.
Listeners, right now, even without that tragedy having occurred.
Can I also just use this opportunity to say I listened to the commentary for this movie, and Nora Ephron was saying how one of her goals with this was for this movie to become popular enough and for tiramisu to become popular enough that she could release her tiramisu recipe to the world.
Whoa.
And she has. So you can find and make Nora Ephron's tiramisu recipe.
Wow.
I need
some
to do
inception going on here.
Yeah. And when I saw the movie for the first time, it was on the Criterion Channel as part of a collection called Fresh Starts. If you know even a little bit about it, it's easy to see why it would fit such a collection.
Yeah.
But I saw it then. I liked it a lot at the time. I think that, maybe it's just not having gotten to spend as much time with it. I think that I am a bigger fan of When Harry Met Sally. It's hard not to compare that to Sleepless in Seattle for several reasons. To be fair, I think I've had more time to really sit with When Harry Met Sally for what that is worth.
Yeah.
But Sleepless in Seattle, it's a charming, delightful movie. And for its many unique aspects, I think I have an easy time understanding its significance in pop culture and why it has endured.
I'm glad to hear that. So, Emilio, you are already kind of hinting at maybe this movie's doing some things that are not necessarily your cup of tea. So I think you maybe are furthest from me of the 3 I'm gathering.
I don't really know. I find this movie to be mostly delightful. I'm not overly bothered by a lot that happens in this movie, although there's some things that do
there are weird.
There's a lot of puzzling things that characters do in this movie.
100%.
That
I do not endorse the behavior of most of these characters.
Well, and we'll get to maybe some of the things that jump out the most, but in general, what I'll say is I think this is a sweet movie. I saw this for the first time probably when I was maybe 18 or 19. I can't totally remember exactly when, but I know I've seen this movie from start to finish at least once, maybe even twice. I agree with you that I think When Harry Met Sally is a better movie on a number of different fronts. But I also think Sleepless in Seattle is trying to do something very different. And this is the first time that I saw this movie and really, I think, understood all the meta aspects of this movie that we are asked to relate and think in our own lives about the personal extents with which we allow concepts of fate or happenstance or luck to dictate how we look at what's happened already in our lives and what may happen in our lives. So there are some things that frustrate me a little bit, but I do like this movie. And I've always actually felt this movie is really sweet at its core and well made. I think this is a perfectly fine movie. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie has been in my life for so long that I feel like I have trouble looking fully objectively at this movie. I don't think I'm capable of looking at this movie and saying, like, these are things that this movie could have done better. I actually think that is not possible for
Sure.
me personally.
I have a lot of movies like that and music like that too
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
my life.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think pretty much everything that this movie is doing works for me, from like a narrative standpoint, from a performance standpoint. I think this movie is very funny. I learned from the commentary that Delia Ephron does a lot of punch up on this movie, and she actually adds in a lot of the humor, which is interesting because I think the screenplay is so great, and it's, mostly attributed to Nora Ephron, but actually Delia should definitely get her flowers for the punch up that she does on this movie.
It also seems like Nora Ephron and I guess Delia came in
Pretty-
already
yeah,
like
late,
later. Like
yeah.
the script was already pretty well developed. So, yeah.
I mean, I think they rewrite it pretty heavily. I think Nora Ephron is maybe like the third person to take a crack at this
Right.
story. And then, Delia does punch up.
Yeah, and I feel like I have to acknowledge that the first time I ever saw the classic screen pair of Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan was in maybe their weirdest pairing in Joe versus the Volcano.
Yeah. Which I have yet to see.
Same.
And I feel
But
like I have
you've
to
done
see
that
it.
as an unlikely shared universe.
I have, yeah, and it's and I also have the DVD too, so maybe I'll be passing that around to you both. But
Maybe
it's
so, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I saw it when I was like 13 or something, and that was a movie a little like some others that we've covered on the podcast that my parents were very enthusiastic about showing me.
Yeah.
And it's a strange movie that, like I think critics were not sure what to think of at the time. It's kind of a cult classic. But that just when we think about how mainstream Sleepless in Seattle is and how strong their chemistry is as a pair, despite the fact that they're in separate locations most of the movie, got to remember Joe versus the Volcano was
Did
their
it first.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
do think you bring up a really interesting point about this movie, which is somehow I think this movie is able to effectively build chemistry between two people that are barely in scenes together.
Mhm.
I think that they are both very effective in their kind of separate storylines, but I also think you somehow, I think, root for this romance, or at least you are supposed to, or at least I do.
Yeah.
And feel that they do have this strong connection and that they are fated. I think we're going to get to that later, despite the fact that they don't know each other and that they have never met. You just know that it's going to be electric when they're together.
Yeah.
I think that really speaks to this screenplay. It speaks to Nora Ephron's directing that they can manufacture that in this way.
Yeah, and also the strength of Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan as
Absolutely.
actors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was my first time coming back to this movie in, as I said, at least 10, maybe 15, maybe almost 20 years. And I'll just say this again. What I didn't really remember was just how meta this movie was about media depictions of romance. And we said it already at the top, but there are strong allusions, even clips and tearful descriptions of the plot of Affair to Remember. So there's a lot of inspiration from that film. There's self-admissions from Annie that she watches too many movies, to the radio show Dr. Marsha. Call her Dr. Marsha, by the way. She doesn't go by anything else. And to the audience proxy friend groups that both Sam and Annie have. But this movie is constantly referencing and reminding us that Sleepless in Seattle is as much about a romance as it is commenting on what romance has come to look like for the characters and also for us as viewers. So I'm wondering if that element of the movie worked for you guys, if there was anything that landed particularly well or maybe not quite as well for you.
I generally like the meta elements of this movie. I think that when you consider the conclusion that it all works towards, I think that those elements are pretty helpful in grounding this movie in a sense of reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I like about the first half of the movie, it's, and this is not a slight to the second half, but I like that the first roughly half, actually it kind of reminds me of When Harry Met Sally in the sense that these characters are kind of just living their lives. The architecture of bringing them together, it's there, but it's not really at the forefront there.
Yeah.
this maybe is just a personal opinion, but I've become very fond of moments in romantic comedies specifically where the characters are just doing things that seem irrelevant.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean,
sort of like the Tarantino Royale with cheese perspective.
sure.
Yeah.
Like the scene in a movie, not this movie, but in a movie that really crystallized that for me was, so a few months ago, I got to see Albert Brooks's movie Modern Romance.
Mhm.
There's a 5-minute sequence of that movie where like Albert Brooks in that movie plays a film editor. And
Yeah,
there's
he's editing with Bruno Kirby.
right.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
5-minute sequence where they're just doing their job and there's nothing said about love. And I loved it.
It's
No,
very modern.
Yeah, it's very, very modern. Thank you.
I mean, when we were talking about our Oscar-worthy rom-com cycle, I feel like Broadcast News is good about that because that's
It
so
is.
much a workplace comedy in addition to it being a romantic comedy. And so often you are just following these people through their workplace.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe it's just shaped by watching a bunch of movies I enjoy like this, but I enjoy that in a romantic comedy, and I think the first half of Sleepless in Seattle has that in great abundance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this element of movies in general, but especially rom-coms, because I do feel like you have to ground the characters first in something
Yeah.
Mhm.
before the filmmakers can ask you, the audience, to go on whatever leap
Yeah.
they're going to take. Because inevitably in these movies, they do take a leap.
Right. I'm personally more invested in the fantastical elements, knowing that there is that level of relatability. And I
Yeah.
think that the scene that my mind is just going to right now is when Annie visits her brother
Yeah.
in his office, and she's reflecting on, I'm in love with someone I've never even seen, I don't even know yet. And then he has this great response. This is David Hyde Pierce's character. He says, Annie, when you're attracted to someone, it just means that your subconscious is attracted to their subconscious subconsciously. So what we think of as fate is just two neuroses knowing they're a perfect match. It's a great counterpoint to the fantastical elements of a story like this, that you have a skeptic character in the movie, but also that you are seeing Annie go through something that is totally real. That, like, maybe we'll talk a little more about it later, but that I think we have all had parasocial experiences of attraction in one way or another, especially in this digital age.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Annie's such an interesting character because she is a romantic in the sense of this obsession with romantic movies, but she is not at first like a romantic in her own love life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's so interesting because she does love Walter. She's Bill Pullman's character. She says this a lot. I do believe her. She doesn't have passion for Walter. That's something really missing in their relationship.
You're bringing up something, for me about
But
this
she
movie.
is, I think she's a very logical person. Nora Ephron said on the commentary that she told Meg Ryan to play Annie as a Republican who's never had an orgasm.
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, it's a great quote.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Great instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does give me kind of a different read on this movie, actually. But I do think she comes into this at the beginning very logical, knowing like this is a very kind man, this is a stable man, this is an attractive man. He is exactly the kind of person that I know that I am supposed to want to be with. And so he is the person I am going to marry. It's all very matter of fact. And when her mother brings up this possibility of like magic and fate and knowing that you're made for someone, Annie's like, that does not compute. Like that is not something that I understand, which is so interesting because we see later her obsession with An Affair to Remember, and as we can assume, probably other romance movies. So I just find it fascinating that she has kind of separated this part of herself.
Right.
Yeah.
Until she hears Sam on the radio.
Well, you bring up something that I think is kind of interesting and a little weird about this movie, but I don't really hold it against the film, which is that rom-coms to me really are asking you to fall in love with either the guy or the girl or both of them. And what you just described about Annie to me is something that I find real, but also like weirdly troubling, I think, which is somebody who cannot bring a certain amount of like reality to the relationships that they have in person and decide to ascribe more value to the relationships that are in their heads. So it's a little bit of a barrier to entry for me with a character, because it's like, I get it, but that doesn't draw me to this person. Like, I don't feel invested in wanting that fantastical outcome for them to happen.
Okay.
Is maybe what I would say to that. But
I have a different read on this. I don't think that I read Annie's character as somebody that is intentionally separating these parts of herself. I read her more as repressed.
Okay.
I think when you look at the kind of family that she comes from also, I think that you see she was likely probably raised in this environment where she is meant to also be looking for a guy like Walter. And in some ways, you look at someone like Sam, maybe stereotypically as a less than ideal partner. Like, he's coming in as a widower. He's coming in with a child from a previous relationship. In a lot of ways, this is the opposite of what you're told to go after.
Right.
And Walter is exactly what she is told to go after. I think it's more about the societal expectations that she has found herself in and that she feels like she needs to follow, and less about like keeping all of this in her head and is not able to bring like that same humanity or love to her actual relationships.
Okay. Yeah.
And then going back to the point about media awareness in the movie, to some extent, the movie is kind of giving itself the permission to go to the length that it does by its end, by creating its own sense of comparison to the zeitgeist of Hollywood. I haven't seen An Affair to Remember, to be clear.
Emilio, have you seen An Affair
I
to
saw it a
Remember?
long time ago.
Okay. I've seen it recently. But Julian, continue.
So yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Doesn't mean I can't appreciate the awareness of the movie, and it's definitely one I'm quite curious about watching now. There's a sense we kind of know and I might use this term again later, the wish fulfillment that rom-coms are often aiming to provide. And so it's one thing for the movie to do it, but then to establish a connection to the greater zeitgeist, I think, justifies it more to the audience and maybe even to the characters as well.
I was just going to say, one of the things that this movie made me feel was incredibly nostalgic for the 90s.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And I want to point out a number of things that happened in this movie that could only happen in the 90s. The first of which is that An Affair to Remember is being watched on a VHS tape. That gets thrown away, but then removed from the trash.
Can't do that with streaming.
Can't do that with streaming.
Canceling my Netflix
I know.
and then resubscribing immediately.
No. Doesn't hit the same way. No. And then there's this monoculture for self-help and advice seekers.
These kind of call-in shows, they don't exist anymore.
They don't, but they absolutely were a thing that I remember.
Absolutely, me too.
And falling asleep listening to the radio was an enormous part of my childhood. Although I was listening more to Bulls broadcasts.
I'll bet that Jonah would throw on a Bulls broadcast
or
if,
like
he
a
was,
Supersonics.
if he was still living in Chicago where he could get them.
Yeah, well, he's got a first row seat, so to speak, to the early 90s. You have the Rain Man and Gary Payton. Sam Perkins about to show up. Detlef Schrempf. Jonah's going to be, and rightfully so, a Supersonics fan coming up here. So that's great. But yes, absolutely. That type of conversation would now just be like maybe on a podcast if it was recorded, but it would be more like a Reddit thread or something that people would have. So there's something specific about the fact that this is the radio.
I love visualizing this happening as a Reddit thread. That's
Just
very
like
funny
searching
to me because I love the idea of someone still being in Meg Ryan's shoes.
Now I'm just picturing Meg Ryan's face with the light of a screen shining on it.
Yeah. The call-in part of this is very different, but I think the idea of somebody going viral on the internet and suddenly a bunch of people are obsessed with them is like that
carries
still.
over.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the movie is foretelling in that way. But yeah, this is something that maybe like if he recorded himself for 1 minute on TikTok today.
So part of what is appealing about Sam is that he does not call
wanna do
into
it.
the radio
Right,
show.
right.
So I think the only way this would work is if somehow Jonah
had a TikTok
Jonah
account.
had a TikTok, which again would reflect poorly on Sam. So that doesn't work either. All right, Gabby Hoffman's character has a TikTok.
She's clearly like wired in a way
Exactly.
that
And
Yeah.
then they drag Sam in on a TikTok live.
Yeah, she'd probably have a great username with all those abbreviations.
Totally, yeah.
Illegible username.
Yeah.
Another one is just dropping somebody off at the gate at an airport.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a huge plot point in this movie. This movie would not hit nearly the same way.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
has to be able to see her. It would not have the same effect like a baggage claim.
No. She's got to be emerging from the terminal
jet
right there.
bridge.
Exactly. I'm going to say another one, which is allergies is a turnoff. I feel like
Now
nowadays.
allergies are hot.
I mean, there's more allergy acceptance, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's never been higher than it is now. So I think, Annie's grown up in a culture where she looks at that and that's like strikes against the ideal guy in a way that I think now maybe not so much.
It's funny. I think she is, though, pretty accepting of his allergies.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
helping him fill the CPAP or the humidifier
Right.
or whatever he's using.
Totally. No. And this has already been said before, but we know what the fuck tiramisu is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes, there's an argument that, there's a butterfly effect thing on this, that
Yeah.
if this movie had never existed, maybe we wouldn't know that as clearly. But I do think that Sam would have ordered this savory dessert already, would know what's going on. And then the other thing, too, that warms my heart about this movie that I just think is really sweet is the practical map of the United States that just shows up all the time.
Yeah.
I love both that there is a practical map that is not in the full reality. It's
Yeah.
like
Totally.
it still pulls down,
Yes.
but to give you as the audience a visualization of the like kind of
Curvature a little
yeah,
bit?
the curvature and the route
topography,
from,
yeah.
from one city to another. But then also the fact that they have in the movie a map in their kitchen.
That's true.
Yeah.
Pull down one. I like that one quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Nora Ephron was talking on the commentary about how as soon as the map became a motif that she really wanted to make it prominent in the movie. And that, well, speaking of things that she mentioned on the commentaries, I think she was talking more about costume design when this came up, but there was a point early on in the commentary when she said that she wanted something timeless in this movie.
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot about this movie that you could call timeless.
Yeah.
Or if not timeless, at least transcendent from the 20th century onward, because the Empire
Sure.
State Building didn't exist before the 1930s, to be totally clear. But also, I think that actually going back to your original question, Emilio, of like the media literacy in this movie, that helps create that timelessness as well. That, the fact that the classics linger on, they continue to influence. This is a good way to bring it back to one of my favorite acknowledgments of media in the movie, which is during one of those two great Rob Reiner scenes. He's bringing up this idea about looking at swatches
Yes.
to Sam Baldwin, and then
Very
Sam
much so, yeah.
Sam says, "You think Cary Grant would call up and say, 'Hello, come and look at my swatches'?"
Yeah, totally.
Because I watched this scene and I think this section is absolutely improvised. I think Rob
yeah.
Reiner has like a very particular kind of affect when he improvises, and it's an affect that works on me, but it's what I immediately clock into when I hear it. And there is a good amount of improv in this movie, not just from Reiner, but also from Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
I think Rita Wilson improvises a little bit in her monologue that I attempted to do a
evoke.
rendition of. So yeah, I think that's very cool about this movie also.
Yeah. Should quickly acknowledge, too, that Rob Reiner's character, I mean, we just keep calling him Rob Reiner, but the name of his character is Jay Matthews.
I don't even know that this character's name is said.
And
Yeah.
I
In the
actually
movie.
like it
Yeah.
Mhm.
a little more that it's Rob Reiner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
it's okay.
It's contractor Rob Reiner.
It does not pull me out of the movie at all.
Not a bit.
He is
He fits
always
seamlessly.
a warm presence.
Yeah. And also, like in the opening credits, I think he's the last name that comes up. So it's not literally, but effectively, he's the with in the
Yeah.
movie.
Yes.
I think we're ready for some full-on comparisons.
Definitely.
Right on, yeah.
We have to talk about An Affair to Remember, because I've seen this movie fairly recent. I had seen it before, but I rewatched this over the holidays with my parents.
Right.
And it is so interesting that An Affair to Remember is a movie that actually I don't think was super successful at the time. Like, it's now a classic. I actually think that this movie maybe had somewhat of a hand in that.
It could be.
It's still a beloved movie. It's a movie about an affair.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is also a movie about an affair.
Yeah.
It's interesting that a good amount of romance movies or rom-coms do have that element of infidelity. We
Right.
talked about Moonstruck,
Right.
Yes,
which is
absolutely.
another movie that you root for the infidelity. So,
Yep.
An Affair to Remember, for those that have not seen it, like Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr.
Yeah.
Kerr. Like a pirate.
Yes.
Carrie and Deb, they meet on like a cruise ship.
Yeah.
And neither of them are with partners. I think that they are both engaged. I know that her character is engaged. I'm pretty sure Cary Grant is engaged as well. But neither of them are with their partners. And because this cruise goes on for so long, or this ship ride, whatever it is, they have the time to form this really tight bond. So you're rooting for their relationship early on. And then when they dock and you meet their fiancés, it's not like their fiancés are introduced as like these terrible, disgusting people that we don't root for. Actually, Deborah Kerr's character's fiancé is a lot like Walter.
Yeah.
Not in that he's like kind of dweeby. I
No,
actually
yeah.
think he's meant to be like a pretty suave,
Yeah.
cool catch. But in the sense of like, he supports her 100%. Even when he finds out about her kind of this relationship she has built with Cary Grant's character, he still is like, I still love you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe her fiance is named Kenneth. I think it's interesting that even though Kenneth has very different characteristics from Walter, they are both these very kind of ideal mates that our female lead just cannot bring themselves to marry because she's in love with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, like I was saying, I think these are also just two movies where you root for the affair, which is fascinating across rom-coms in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hearing what you were just saying, Madeline, I couldn't help but think as well of His Girl Friday.
Yeah.
Specifically about Ralph Bellamy's character in that movie, who is a great example of a term that is relevant to Sleepless in Seattle as well, of the Baxter,
Mm-hmm.
an existing romantic partner who is dumped during the movie.
Yeah.
Or if not dumped, just kind of like left in favor of someone more appealing. Bill Pullman exemplifies this in Sleepless in Seattle. In His Girl Friday, there's that same sense that Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, I mean, you can tell the movie is setting those two up to dance around one another, and you just kind of wonder the whole time, so what's going to happen to Ralph Bellamy?
Right.
Because he's also like a pretty solid character.
Totally.
He's, maybe a little more square in his existence, but he's a reliable, kind person and seems like a totally suitable husband. But in thinking of movies that are forgiving, if not of infidelity, then of marriages dissolving, and also the 1990s, I mean, this is going to sound like a stretch at first, but hear me out.
Okay.
Couldn't help but think a little bit of Thelma and Louise. That,
Yeah,
more
I mean-
like specifically for the marriage dissolving part.
Yeah, but that's like for a very different kind of
Yeah.
reason.
Very different.
Very
Yeah.
different reason, but I was thinking
Domestic abuse, maybe?
Yeah.
right. I was thinking specifically about how the relationship between Louise and Jimmy, which is Michael Madsen's
Right.
character in the movie, dissolves, which is like, especially considering the kind of characters
Oh, okay.
who
Yeah.
Michael Madsen can play, relatively peaceful.
Yes.
Okay.
He's a little more Walter-like in that role, and it's like, there's some fraughtness there. It's also like far from the worst thing that happens in that movie.
Yeah. I mean, another movie I think on this similar wavelength, going back to more classic films, is the Philadelphia Story. I mean, that's another one where you've got intersecting lines in that, like, the couple that you kind of want to end up together are like already divorced, actually. And then she's engaged to somebody else, and that's why they're here for her wedding. So that's another movie both that has this complicated love triangle or larger, more complicated shape, but also you're rooting for the dissolving of an engagement in that case.
Yeah.
Yes.
I still have to see it. Well, while we're in our comparison corner, we've said a lot about other films with similarities in how they deal with relationships, but there's another important aspect of Sleepless in Seattle that I want to call out with my next comparison, which is to a movie that we have covered, and pretty recently at that, The Goodbye Girl.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's specifically because an important part of The Goodbye Girl is this sense that the kid is part of the deal.
Okay. I follow you now.
Jonah deserves a lot of credit for the outcome of this movie.
Oh, 100%.
I mean,
not just the outcome, the plot of this movie.
Everything emanates from Jonah.
Yeah, like
he drives the action.
Yes, he's the driver.
Yeah.
And Lucy may not be the driver in the same way in The Goodbye Girl, but she's so important to the story. And Lucy is a character who needs to be consulted in order for this relationship to materialize.
Yeah, totally.
I think there's definitely grounds for a comparison there.
Sure.
I follow you.
I see that.
Yeah.
One movie that I really, really like, and I actually rewatched after seeing Sleepless in Seattle. Another 90s gem, highly lauded, very well liked. This is Jerry Maguire. This is the Cameron Crowe film from 1996. Tom Cruise, Renee Zellweger, Cuba Gooding Jr. Sleepless in Seattle ends in an elevator and is like, okay, here we go. This couple is going to make a go at it, right?
Yeah.
Jerry Maguire essentially starts there.
Yeah.
In an elevator with these two people making a decision that based on their gut, they're going to go at something together. It doesn't start necessarily romantically. That's definitely where it ends up. I really like how Jerry Maguire walks this tightrope between a movie that is so much about fantasy and how the media influences what we think of romance and what we look for in romance in our own lives with things that actually happen to people and actual conversations that people have. So where I wanted to see what was going to happen to Sam and Annie, I feel like Jerry Maguire actually does. Like it actually gives you this story of these people that make this impulsive decision and then decide to see what happens. And I like how messy Jerry Maguire gets. It is fully acknowledged in how they act that they are living in a world that is deeply influenced by media.
Yeah.
And that they're still drawn to certain outcomes. When you watch that movie from start to finish and you think about the hold that media and societal conditions have on the way that we look at love and relationships and what you do in the name of love when there's real stakes, when you get to that line and the way Renee Zellweger delivers "You Had Me at Hello," you cannot convince me that Jerry Maguire is not also a very meta rom-com, that we aren't seeing her reckon with the illusion of romance that her life is set up and the realities of what living life really does to those illusions, and how sometimes illusions are still the thing that you are drawn to, and how frustrating but also potentially wonderful that can be. So I just couldn't help but think of these two movies together.
And Jerry Maguire, that's another movie where like they just have these doing their job scenes that seem not to relate to the rest of the plot at all. And like there's also the sense, well, I mean, in Sleepless in Seattle, there's a scene where Sam and Annie seem to have each other at hello from across a highway,
because
but still
all they could say was hello.
Right. But you don't get the ability to know later on that she really was had at hello. We can assume. But we don't see something with ups and downs. It's cool though. These movies are going for slightly different things, but I think they're similar.
I'd say different. Yeah, I see the similarities 100%. I absolutely though think this movie cuts off at the appropriate point.
Yeah,
I don't think.
No, I agree.
Beyond.
I don't want this movie necessarily going there, but I am personally drawn.
Yeah, totally.
To what happens to people when they actually make decisions like this.
Totally.
And it's one of the things that I think is a strength in Jerry Maguire.
All right.
And Jerry Maguire is another movie where the kid's part of the deal too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see how that would hold up on a rewatch because I saw it like around a decade ago and I didn't love it at the time. I think, with some of the things you're mentioning and an updated attention to detail, I wonder if I would like it more on rewatch. Good potential situation for a very different perspective.
The movie knows what it is. It's
Yeah.
a rom-com through and through. Yeah.
And I think that's been our comparison corner.
I think it has.
Definitely.
Well, in both my initial viewing and the rewatch for this conversation, I was struck by Sleepless in Seattle as a commentary on parasocial relationships. That term's come up before, but we can dig into it a little more now, especially because these characters are not known public figures in the movie. Granted, Sam does go a 90s version of viral, but he's not a famous personality. He is just a guy who in that way got lucky. And the first half of the film is more what we can realistically expect of such an infatuation, with, I think, varying appropriate amounts of cynicism, while the second half creates a somewhat impossible scenario to bring Annie and Sam together. So what do we make of this film's perspective on parasocial relationships and the possibility of their fulfillment?
Yeah, I mean, this movie, I think a reason why some people struggle with this is that Annie is insane. And Annie is fully stalking Sam. And I love this movie. I find no faults with this movie. But also, two things can be true. And the thing that is also true is that Annie is a crazy person that has been stalking him across the country. And that also, once he finds out what she has been doing as far as literally coming to his house and watching him and his child creepily from across the street, that if I were Sam, I would be like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Get away from me.
Yep.
This is fatal attraction.
Yes.
So I think that it is so interesting to see this 1993 take on parasocial relationships, because parasocial relationships were absolutely a thing at this time.
Oh, yeah.
These are not of 21st century creation. Some of the most dangerous parasocial relationships existed in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting for this film to be able to balance that with a romance you also root for.
Yeah, I brought back this book that I referred to a lot in our episode cycle on Oscar-worthy rom-coms. That is Esther Zuckerman's book, Falling in Love at the Movies. And
welcome back, Esther.
yes. And well, Sleepless in Seattle is like almost a framing device for the whole book. Like there are many references to it. And, one passage that Esther Zuckerman writes early in the book about the movie is that by mere description, this film, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but by mere description, this film should sound like a horror setup. And then after she summarizes the movie a little bit, she says, in other hands, this would be the saga of a crazed stalker. And sure, to some people it still is. But Ephron's ability to romanticize the idea of a persona makes it endearing. And I think that a huge selling point of the movie to that effect is very early on, like we've acknowledged it, but we haven't really dug into yet, the scene when Annie is in her car and hears Sam on the radio, which to me, I think is the strongest scene in the whole movie.
It's a great scene. They're both great in it because she has to completely sell you based on her reactions that she is falling in love with like a voice. But I think Tom Hanks also, like, he has to be so incredibly charming that women across the country will fall in love with him.
Right. Adding to it is the irony that the character Sam is not looking to express any charm at the moment. He's being very pure of heart.
I do think that that's true charm. I think people attempting to be charming often do not come across as such.
Yeah, that's a great point. But also that, like, the same can be said of Annie in that scene. And it's a testament to Meg Ryan's strength as an actor that, as a character, she doesn't know she's being watched by the viewer.
That's true.
And
that's true. Yep.
Yeah. And that, just seeing her react to his testimony on the air, there's something very automatic, very raw about what she is doing. And at that point, we don't know what her life has been like with Walter before this occurs, but she, to our knowledge as viewers, has not entertained the idea of stepping out of this engagement.
No.
And you don't get the sense too that there's any like anger towards Walter informing it.
Definitely
it really
not.
is a very sincere emotional response you see her have. And this this is something totally plausible to
Yeah.
hear something like that on the radio and be moved in the way that she is.
I think the most romantic reading of this is that she just found somehow the person she was truly meant to be with at the exact wrong time.
Right.
Yeah. Something that's coming to my mind now when it comes to the more realistic elements of love life that this movie gets into is that often in experiences of misfortune in love life, we as people can be prone to magical thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And that I feel like that's
The word magic has a very particular importance.
Magic.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
in her falling in love with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, no matter how developed our senses of reason, that sometimes the human mind can go to places that would seem irrational.
Yeah.
And you bring up a good point here, which is that nowadays people are not discussing their parasocial relationship.
Yeah.
This is something that stays way more in someone's head, but
It may make its way to Reddit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
But
it.
like
Another
anonymously.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. That there's a certain amount of privacy that people have with those parasocial relationships. And that's, I think, one of the interesting things about this movie is that it takes that desire that somebody has that we've all, I think, felt in some way, shape, or form, but like puts it up there for scrutiny or judgment of some kind. And I wanted a little bit more of that David Hyde Pierce energy and a little less of the Rosie O'Donnell.
See, that's crazy to me. I think Rosie is great in this. She's so funny. And I think like that is such, to me, an accurate female friendship. They're finishing each other's sentences. She is the person that I understand that, yes, David Hyde Pierce is the type of person that Annie probably needs to like bring her back down to earth rather than having somebody like Rosie O'Donnell who is entertaining this idea. I understand from a logical perspective that that's probably what she needs. She also needs therapy, but I do think that this unjudgmental, almost romantic female friendship, I really root for. And I actually think is something that if I'm not rooting for the romance, then I'm on David Hyde Pierce's side. But if I'm somebody that buys into the romance between Sam and Annie and I want them to get together, then I need Rosie to be able to move that along. She's the one that encourages Annie. She's the one that sends the letter herself. Rosie is probably the person after Jonah on the list for the rest of this movie would not have happened were it not for Rosie's actions.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And so I want to quickly shout out one of my favorite lines from her in the movie when the letter back from Sam comes in.
We're going to say the same thing, but I'll let you say it.
Let's do it together. 3, 2, 1.
It's cute. It's like a little clue. Is that what yours was?
Actually, it isn't, but this works out nicely because it's complimentary. And so I forget exactly what the word usage was that she responds to, but so we can't write. Big deal. Verbal ability is a highly overrated thing in a guy, and now a pathetic need for it is what gets us into so much trouble.
Yes, that is the full line, and I do love that one as well. I just think that's really, really great.
Absolutely. And also just like the differences in the energy between Meg Ryan and Rosie O'Donnell, who we should call her by name too, Becky.
Yes,
that's her name.
She does actually get a name.
Yeah, not a last name, but a first name.
Funny how they gave Rob Reiner's character a first and last name that they don't say, to my knowledge, but they only give Rosie O'Donnell's character a first name.
Yeah.
And I also think that something that's important about Becky is that she actually is kind of jaded when it comes to romance.
Yeah.
She's, to a certain extent, living vicariously through Annie.
Yeah.
Because she is in a fraught relationship with Rick.
Vicarious is a great word to bring into this. Yeah. And that, well, it's funny. I almost got, a little brain scrambled about this because a year before Sleepless in Seattle, Rosie O'Donnell, along with Tom Hanks and Bill Pullman, are all in a league of their own together.
Yes, which we have discussed.
Yeah. And Rosie O'Donnell's character in that movie is also, I think, getting out of a fraught relationship.
And there's also the aspect of Bill Pullman is the actual
right.
romantic.
And Tom Hanks is the
exactly.
alternative.
They're Tom Hanks and Bill Pullman are in kind of a love triangle in that movie as well.
Yeah, with Gina Davis at the center.
Like Gina Davis is married to Bill Pullman and Tom Hanks.
I love this.
There's like a flirtation between her and Tom Hanks. I don't think you root for them to end up together in the same way, but there's a similarity there.
I didn't acknowledge this earlier, but Bill Pullman is also in Singles.
Yeah.
Playing maybe Baxter's not the full description of that character, but there's a bit of that there.
And While You Were Sleeping.
Yeah. He's everywhere, man.
That he comes up in Esther Zuckerman's Falling in Love at the Movies too, and she cites him as, actually, let me find the passage. Other than Ralph Bellamy, the actor most associated with the Baxter is Bill Pullman, who embodies the type in Sleepless in Seattle as Walter. And there's an interesting aspect of the chapter where this comes up, where Zuckerman's also referring to this movie called The Baxter, written and directed by Michael Showalter from 2005. And there's a line in that movie where this is a statement from Michael Showalter, Walter, we've got that layer there, himself. I think the Bill Pullman character in that is a really great character. He's really funny and I love all of his scenes in it. Then about halfway through the movie, she dumps him. Then it becomes about her and Tom Hanks, and I didn't identify as well with Tom Hanks, who was just kind of perfect in every way. It's an interesting perspective, and I didn't really necessarily feel that same sense of disconnect. But, having a Baxter character in this movie, I do think that there is a sense of the stakes being raised in the parasocial realm by the fact that there is a real relationship here.
Yeah.
And, just something I'm considering now in terms of Walter as a character is that he doesn't have any parasocial infatuations that
that we know of.
Not that we know of. Yeah. He's the tangible for Annie. Seems like you have something to say about this.
No, I just okay, so I get what this movie is going for. A lot of it is very charming. And, this bugged me the first time I saw it. And now, as somebody who's lived and gone through relationships and breakups and is now married and has a kid, the manner in which Walter folds is just almost infuriating. It does pull me out of the movie. It pulled me. Pullman. Because the movie does a little wink to the fact that he's going above and beyond and that he knows it. Mm-hmm. But my God, I mean, that you would react the way that he does to me, just makes no fucking sense.
I mean, I agree with you. It does not make logical sense. As Julian pointed out earlier, I think that a good chunk of the second half of this movie is romantic fantasy.
Yeah.
And wishful fulfillment.
I actually would really appreciate if he got upset and was just
I disagree
what
with
are you
so
doing?
Strongly. Because then this movie is 20 minutes longer. Because you can't go from that.
It can be 2 minutes longer or 30 seconds longer.
It can't. It cannot, because if he gets mad, you don't root for them anymore. She can't walk out of that restaurant if he has gotten up and yelled at her and gotten upset at her.
Such a more interesting movie if he does.
She can't. Maybe it's more interesting, but it's not the romance that I want. It's not the romance that I want to root for.
Okay.
Because then she can't run to Tom Hanks, and you then have to feel bad about what she has done to Walter. And you probably should. We probably should. She has treated Walter badly. I'm not saying she hasn't treated Walter badly. I agree with you on that. However, I think that the only way you're allowed to root for their romance at the end is if Walter is okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. It's where I just can't go with this movie. Is accepting that a character would just fold the way he does to this, and that
he has been proven though to be a doormat throughout the entire movie.
It's true.
Then do something about it when it actually looks like you're going to lose the woman that you're engaged to. Here's what I'll say to bring this all back around. I think this is as good as any argument that Walter also is in a parasocial relationship with somebody else, because only somebody who is willing to give up that quickly.
Fair enough.
That's an interesting way of bringing it full circle too, because, in bringing up this term parasocial relationships, I can't divorce this, to use an appropriate term, from the present in which we live. And the sense that what should be purely social is now weirdly parasocial now.
Yeah.
Most of our association with the term goes towards, like celebrity crushes and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can have a parasocial relationship with someone who is totally ordinary, and that you can know someone directly and still there's something kind of maybe one-sided is the term that's more often used, but parasocial too, that you can like maybe you're getting more out of a relationship dynamic than the other person is. And so there are arguments in both directions for how Walter exists in this story. But actually, I like that you put it that way, Emilio, that, he is in a parasocial relationship in a way with his own fiance.
Right.
Yeah, totally. I want to go back to an affair to remember really quickly, because I do think that, first of all, the parasocial relationship thing is interesting in that movie because Cary Grant's character is meant to be kind of a celebrity in that movie.
Yeah.
And Deborah Kerr or Carr, like
Debbie.
she is not interested in him because he's a celebrity. Everybody else on the cruise ship is interested in him because he's a celebrity. She's actually like mostly keeping her distance until they're forced together. But that, again, I was talking about the fact that An Affair to Remember has a Walter, and I would say that An Affair to Remember's Walter, whose character's name is actually Kenneth, is even more of a doormat than Walter, because not only does he accept the fact that she is in love with another man, they stay like together in some sense. Possibly, it doesn't really confirm in the movie if they're still together romantically when Cary Grant's character later comes to her after she has been paralyzed, but Kenneth is caring for her like actively, like they are still living together, and he is her primary caregiver in her paralyzed state, even though he knows she's in love with somebody else and had an affair with that person while they were engaged.
Which makes me think that Kenneth is the creepiest character in that movie, because now he
like,
really has control over her. Like, you can't even move. Maybe he's more responsible for her paralyzing.
He was driving that cab.
Exactly. Yep.
What you're saying.
Or paid somebody off to do it.
My mind is going to a strangely dark place now, but I'm remembering that Sam has a line in Sleepless in Seattle. This is what people do when they're dating. They try other people on to see how they fit. And I was like, oh, well, this guy hasn't seen The Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. 2 years before.
But he has seen Fatal Attraction. And somehow assumes his son has seen Fatal Attraction too.
Yeah.
I think he was very heated in that moment. He knows Jonah hasn't seen it, although Jed's got cable.
Yeah. Good point.
So at the beginning of the film, Annie and Sam both seem kind of skeptical of fate. Annie pretty pointedly because of the conversation with her mother that we already talked about. And Sam just is kind of doubtful because he had this great love that it could be repeated for him again. So how do you guys think their journeys open them up to the idea of fate? And then also, what signs does Nora Ephron in the movie give us that these two are fated to be together?
I want to start with the second part of that question.
Yeah.
This movie, as was stated a little bit before, has to have that scene at the gate.
Yeah.
This movie does not work if there isn't this feeling that Sam is somehow picking this one woman out of a whole sea of other people.
There's no perfect woman except that one.
Exactly. Right.
Otherwise, it's one-sided, and then it's way creepier.
Totally, yes. I also feel like, again, this is something that, like, I put my hands up in the air and just kind of say, this is part of the construction of the film, and it has its charms, but the son, Jonah, and his machinations, the second phone call he makes to Dr. Marcia, and how that seems to solidify even further for Annie, that this is something that she has to go for.
Just to see through.
Yeah, that she has to see this even further through. Those are the ones that stood out for me that are allowing the stalker elements of this film to be softened a bit, which are really important. I agree with you. Like, there are certain things that you have to accept if you want to go all the way with this film. And those are some things that are there to help you along.
Yeah. And sometimes it comes down to little motifs, like what my mind immediately went to, just considering your question, Madeline, is that early on in the movie, you have that scene where Annie is listening to a rebroadcast of Sam, and then she's cutting the skin off the apple.
Yeah.
And then later on, I think it's right after Jonah has the nightmare and he's tending to him that, he's bringing up the recollection of Jonah's mom, his wife, and that she used to be able to cut all the skin off an apple in the same way.
Peel an apple in one long curly strip.
Right. So it's, when you have connections like that, and also just the fact that these two characters see each other once and, they have the classic love at first sight, there is something simply metaphysical about them being fated. And there's a sense of...
Or their subconsciousnesses are attracted to each other.
Subconsciously. Yeah, and then two neuroses realizing they're perfect for each other. But I think that the grounding in realistic details is meant to create a sense of contrast when the extraordinary comes in.
Yeah.
To some extent, the fate is just... I think it is simply that fate is fate, that it's liberating to be a writer who can manipulate the arcs of these characters. But I think that there is something to be said in terms of drawing the audience, of simply giving them a pleasant fantasy and asking them to suspend disbelief. I think a lot of people going to see this movie are going to see it to do that in the first place.
Willingly doing that. Yeah,
Totally.
That's exactly their intention. But I can't get it out of my mind that we only see the beginning of their relationship at the end of this movie.
Yeah, again, when Sam finds out all the weird shit that she's done, they probably are not going to last so long.
A little bit like another movie that we discussed in the winter, The Apartment. Technically, there's a little open-endedness.
Totally.
There's something I think that Julia Ephron said on the commentary about a lot of romantic stories she admired. They end at the beginning. It's like the courtship. Some of what you see, but the relationship itself is not really what you experience of the characters. She was really thinking of Jane Austen novels. This is probably imbuing the ending with a sense of nuance that most viewers are not seeking from this movie. But I think Sam and Annie being fated in this way really only lasts as much as we see within the narrative confines.
Yeah. I'm not interested in what happens after the end of this movie because I'm happy with where it ends. I love that you brought up the apple peeling. I think it was Nora Ephron on the commentary that points out just how important this moment is and how they were trying to figure out something, a clue that they could give the audience to show that these two are meant to be together. And that the really interesting way that they introduce this is that the apple peeling that you see Annie do happens first. And then there's actually at least one, if not two scenes in between us seeing Annie peel the apple and Sam bringing it up to Jonah. So it's a really interesting kind of construction there where you actually see the action before you see how it is relevant to the story and you see it as a sign. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I think is really beautiful about the moment where Sam is telling Jonah about this is that it's not just the nightmare. The motivation for him bringing up this specific detail is that Jonah says to Sam, I'm starting to forget her. Mm-hmm. Because he's so young. He's 8. She's been dead a year and a half. So he was 7, maybe 6 when she died. Mm-hmm. So he's so young. He is going to forget parts of her as he gets older. And that is so tragic.
Yeah, that's a great line.
And what Sam is able to do with that detail is not paint a broad picture, but bring a specific memory or a specific new detail that maybe Jonah didn't know. And I just think that's really beautiful because it works for their relationship and it also works to connect Sam to Annie.
Very well said.
I like that. Very nice.
Well, do you guys have any notable fun details or shout outs about this movie?
I do. Yeah. So apparently before Sleepless in Seattle was in the hands of Nora Ephron, there was a different director attached to this project by the name of Nick Castle. He had already had some directing credits to his name, but do you guys know what Nick Castle is best known for?
I absolutely know this name, but I cannot place it.
He is an actor who played a role referred to on paper as The Shape, but culturally much better known as Michael Myers from the original Halloween.
Yes.
Now this is ringing a bell.
We could be living in a world where Sleepless in Seattle was directed by Michael Myers.
Wow.
Different kind of Sleepless.
Yeah. I want to call it Horrified in Haddonfield.
You absolutely could cut this movie as a horror thriller.
Totally, yeah.
100%.
And maybe
in
that's
fact,
what it would have been.
I think people have, actually. I think you can find people on YouTube who have done that.
Like
who have
the
cut
people
the
who
trailer.
make The Shining like a happy-go-lucky
exactly.
film. Yeah.
I don't think you need any different footage. I think just with editing choices and score, then you can absolutely make this into a thriller.
Well, since you mentioned The Shining, Emilio, that this sounds like a stretch, but hear me out, that So there's one small part in this movie that we haven't acknowledged yet, which is Clarice, the babysitter.
Yeah.
Speaking of names from horror movies, and that Nora Ephron said on the commentary that despite the fact that Clarice only appears in 2 scenes of the movie, that she wanted a Shelley Duvall type for the role.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
And the actor who played Clarice, Amanda Marr, fit that to her liking. And then even though she didn't get a very big part in this movie, apparently, I haven't seen it yet, but apparently she's a little more prominent in You've Got Mail.
Ah, interesting. Nora Ephron also said in the commentary that she just found this actress like at a restaurant.
Great find. But the thing I love about Clarice is that in the first scene we have with her where she's just sitting on the couch, I think watching TV, that for most of the time her eyes are just in that same direction.
Yeah.
Even if it's only, a way of dressing the scenery. I loved the fact that, that she was so mono-focused in that way.
I love Clarice. I think Clarice is a great addition because she is such a checked out teenage babysitter.
They exist. They're out there.
Absolutely think that she fulfills the Shelley Duvall vibe too.
Yeah. Dougie also thought she looked like Liza Minnelli.
I see that.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I
pretty
like
easy
that.
to
That's
see.
good.
This is my favorite little detail in the whole movie, and it's also my biggest laugh in the whole movie, that there's a scene relatively early on where you see Annie and Walter lying together in bed, and Walter is snoring, and he's, just because of what he's breathing out of his mouth, the flap of his pajamas is blowing back and forth in front of his face. And I had a huge laugh at that for a very specifically personal reason. I love my dad. But he, amongst family members, is known for some, let's say, resonant snoring.
I'd say many dads are.
They are, but just, resembling what Bill Pullman does in this movie to a degree that, especially when I first saw it, I could not stop laughing.
Yeah.
Also, that Nora Ephron acknowledges on the commentary, and I feel like it's worth saying, Bill Pullman is a great comic actor.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe
he's
more
wonderful.
than he is given credit for.
Have you guys ever seen Ruthless People?
No.
He is hilarious in that movie. That's a wacky movie, and he is so dialed into where that movie is going. He is great. So I'm with you there.
Yeah.
My favorite joke in this movie is so minor, but towards the end, when they go to Gabby Hoffman's character and they're trying, because Jonah has gone somewhere, they don't know where he's gone, and they're trying to get it out of Gabby Hoffman. And, and she says, NY. Tom Hanks says, what is that? Her dad says, no way. And Tom Hanks says, that's in W. Is my favorite joke in this whole movie.
That's real good.
And maybe the one that has stuck with me the most, that I remember most vividly from watching this for the first time. I just think it's so funny. And Delia Ephron was talking on the commentary about how this was kind of an accident, that this wasn't originally in the script. Nora Ephron calls her as they're filming the scene and is like, there's something just not working. And Delia had been wanting to put in NY as no way, just because it kind of feels like it should be.
Sure. Yeah.
And so she suggests this to Nora Ephron just to say to have her say NY. Nora Ephron thinks she's saying that because she's saying New York. So they have pretty much this exact same conversation over the phone and then end up putting it onto the movie. And it is my favorite joke in the movie.
I love that.
Nice.
That's great. That's good. There's a deleted scene for this movie you can find on YouTube that features our queen, Parker Posey.
Ooh.
This came up on the commentary too.
Yes, as a young woman named Lulu and 2 other women whose characters' names are Jo Beth and Ashley. They're essentially Sam's groupies who listen to the radio show and discover where he lives, and they invite him to a party. I dig that woman's vibe.
Yeah.
She's like Jimi Hendrix at Monterey Pop. She's so fully formed right away. She almost is too much for this movie in a good way. She's so electric for 30 seconds to the point where if she was in this movie, I think her career would have been different. Have you guys seen this scene?
I actually haven't. No.
It is worth it. You can see in the movie, and I don't know if this is direction or his response to her, but he is digging her vibe. He is picking up what she's putting down. So much so that I wonder if there was a little bit of making things right because Parker Posey shows up as Tom Hanks's girlfriend in You've Got Mail.
Wow,
Yeah.
look at that.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to watch this. I just wanted to shout out that one of the details that Annie includes in her letter is that Brooks Robinson is the greatest third baseman of all time, and that is very important to her because she is from Baltimore.
Right.
And I haven't asked my parents this directly, but I feel like the fact that this is partially a Baltimore movie with direct references to the Orioles is probably part of the reason why they like this movie so much and why they showed it to me when I was so young, because we are an Orioles family. I grew up an Orioles fan. And so that shout out is really cool to hear because
Nice.
that is a proven fact. And also when you get the silent flashback of Sam and his wife Maggie taking Jonah to a Cubs game.
Oh.
The Cubs are playing the Mets.
Oh, interesting. That moment was the
Yeah.
most emotional this movie got me.
That
And not
makes
because
sense.
I was seeing Chicago, but because of how beautifully it was there and then suddenly gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That moment stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
It was very well executed. Well
Totally.
done.
Yeah, and also
Yeah.
the second, not exactly a flashback, but the scene when Sam's late wife appears to him in front, like while he's
Right.
lying on the couch.
That's what I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah.
That's the most sleepless thing that happens.
Yeah.
yeah.
Holmes starts having a delusion there.
And he
That's- yeah.
says to Jonah that this is not the only time this has happened. It's the only time we see it.
Right,
And
right.
he's like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I talk to her all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a kind of cinematic that the film, like, it doesn't really seem to ever get otherwise. Well, a few quick shout outs before we transition. Walter's not a dad in this movie, but there are a few great dad joke moments that he has. This is maybe less a joke as much as a mistake, but still, Duluth, that's in North Dakota.
Mhm.
That was one amusing line. And this is a dad joke. Can we have a bottle of Dom DeLuise?
Yes.
Mhm.
I like that. That was a nice touch.
Going back to everything that we're saying about parasocial relationships. So this line is not about parasocial relationships, but I think it's connected for reasons you'll see. That when Jessica, that's Gabby Hoffman's character, and Jonah are buying him his plane ticket, they are lying about some details of him, and she says, if it's in the computer, they'll believe anything.
Yeah, she's right.
That line has
Aged.
sadly aged well.
Yeah.
One last thing just about how precocious Jonah is, that during the scene when Annie is putting details into the computer, like to figure out which Sam Baldwin it is she's looking for, and she manages to find their home phone number, that it's Jonah who's recorded the outgoing
Yeah.
message.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys record your outgoing messages when you were younger?
No.
That's a good question. I don't know if we had like a personalized answering message.
Yeah.
I cannot remember one.
My sister and I used to do that all the time. Put that down for another 90s touch right there.
I mean, sure. I
Yeah.
will say, I was born in 1992. I was a child in the 90s. I personally did not experience this, but I'm sure many people did.
Yeah. I remember the answering machine days too.
I mean, I have a lot of experience with answering machines.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't think our particular answering machine could do a personalized message.
Right. Also got to shout out the cardboard cutout of James Dean
Yeah.
in Annie's office at the Baltimore Sun.
That's right.
I don't know that there's an explanation, but it is literally a nice set decoration.
Well, it goes back to, film iconography.
That's true.
for sure.
Good point.
They have a parasocial relationship with the James Dean cutout.
Yeah, and you also have this great match cut between Annie exiting her brother's office, and then you have Sam and Rob Reiner walking out of a
Jay.
building to go down to the Pike Place Market in Seattle. It's the same door in different cities.
And Nora Ephron says on the commentary that Julian's alluding to, they brought the door from Baltimore to Seattle. It is
Yeah.
actually the same door.
That is remarkable.
Yeah.
That's an insane amount of effort for this, particularly because it's not really a detail you notice unless you're really paying attention or have someone point it out to you directly.
How
Maybe-
adorable.
Maybe the
Uh-huh.
closest you see to a real life fulfillment on the level of this movie.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say is that when Annie is running to the Empire State Building, the theme that is playing is actually the original theme from An Affair to Remember.
There we go. Just tying it all back.
Are we ready for Unlikely Shared Universe?
I
Oh my God, we are
believe
ready.
so.
Let's do it.
Sweet. Anybody want to start?
I could start because mine is a very minor character.
Go
And
for it.
actually, this one is interesting because Julian already knows who this is. And Emilio, you may be able to get it just by the details that I'm going to give you.
Great.
But this is not something you've seen. this is our 100th episode. This is a movie that I love dearly. And so I had to connect it to another thing that I love dearly.
Mhm.
So when Annie rides the elevator to the top of the Empire State Building, an elderly elevator attendant observes that it's empty and allows her to take a minute to collect herself from this disappointment. This is extremely important to Annie and Sam's love story, because if the attendant hadn't let Annie wait for a minute, she wouldn't have run into Sam and Jonah when they came back for Jonah's backpack. So fate.
There we go.
It turns out that this attendant's name is Dwayne Milford, and he has recently come to believe in love and fate after being skeptical for many years. You see, Dwayne has recently moved to New York City with his bride, who he has somewhat of a May December romance with. The two of them moved to New York from a small town in Washington State, where Dwayne had served as mayor for 14 consecutive terms. Their town has always been an odd place, but during Dwayne's final mayoral term, tragedy struck when a teenage girl was found dead, wrapped in plastic, leading an FBI agent to the town to investigate this mysterious murder. It was around the same time that Dwayne met his now wife, but he did not trust her at first because she was engaged to his brother, and Dwayne thought that she was only after his money and his newspaper empire. When his brother later dies of a heart attack, Dwayne blamed the woman and her wiles for leading his brother to the grave. But she eventually won him over, and after additional murders and disappearances continue to rock the town, the two of them decide to get out of Dodge with the insurance money that she has acquired after Dwayne's brother's death. Dwayne finishes out his mayoral term, and then the two move to New York City, where Dwayne takes a job as an elevator attendant, happy to escort lovers to the highest point in New York on the most romantic day of the year. And he may have been up there in the afternoon when Jonah first arrived and could have heard him ask, "Where's Annie?"
Oh, wow. Oh my God. I didn't even like that last layer. Didn't even think of that.
Thank you.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And it's more like Sleepless in Twin Peaks in that case.
Exactly.
Yeah. From Washington State to New York.
Exactly.
Yep.
There we go. There's a pipeline.
I also wore my Twin Peaks shirt specifically for this reason. Like with Orlando, when I saw the actress from Poor Things, as soon as the elevator opens, I don't think I've rewatched this movie maybe since watching Twin Peaks. Like I haven't seen this probably in 10 or 15 years. And so as soon as the elevator opened, I'm like, that's the mayor of Twin Peaks.
Yeah. I wish I could have the actor's name right in front of me.
This actor's name is John Boylan.
Yeah. Shout out to John Boylan.
Shout out.
There was a part of me that before I really sorted out the old men in Twin Peaks in my mind, I thought he was maybe that waiter who walks with the single bottle of milk.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't look that similar when you compare
that
them.
guy, I think, feels a lot taller.
Yeah, that guy's lankier. Yeah, great elderly actors who appeared in Twin Peaks.
Cool.
Cool. Well, since we've gone there, can I follow this up?
Go for it.
All right. So the dissolution of the relationship between Annie and Walter appears rather peaceful, with Walter seeming to take this news with dignity. But after some time left on his own, Walter struggles to regain the happiness he felt with Annie, while also feeling pent up in the relatively square life he has led so far. Initially as a coping mechanism, Walter begins learning to play the saxophone, but finds he has a passion for the instrument and realizes he may have the prospect of a new career in music. As he develops a style, Walter initially takes to jazz greats such as Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, but something else moves in him when he veers into the experimental, a la John Zorn. Reinventing himself as an avant-garde jazz musician,
Very avant-garde.
Walter moves out west and settles in Los Angeles. And to belatedly respond to Annie's point that he's only ever been called Walter, he takes up the stage name Fred Madison and quickly develops a following. Despite the oft-mentioned statistic that one is more likely to be murdered by a terrorist than marry over 40, Fred Madison actually lucks out and marries a beautiful young woman named Renee. However, the polite betrayal of his ex-fiancée Annie leaves Walter, or Fred, with a sometimes subconscious but persistent sense of jealousy. And even in a stable relationship, Fred can't help but worry. A reckoning in Fred's sense of romantic and sexual security begins when his seemingly peaceful Los Angeles existence is disturbed by a mysterious unidentified voice on his intercom one morning with the cryptic message, "Dick Laurent is dead," soon followed by Fred and Renee receiving a series of videotapes ostensibly taken by a stalker, filming them in their own home.
Yeah.
You can see why I wanted to do this as a follow-up, right?
Well, this is Lost Highway.
Lost Highway.
Yeah.
And to give Walter or Fred a little more of the conclusion that maybe we think he deserves.
I was going to say, but also Fred's kind of a dirtbag, which the kind of repressed energy that I like to imbue Walter with works great for Fred.
Yeah, I agree, because you were talking about how one thing that frustrates you is the fact that Walter takes Annie's insanity a bit too amicably. Maybe it was just like delayed response.
Well,
he was just in shock at the time.
There we go. This feels like what might happen to a character like Walter.
Yeah.
And also that I think Lost Highway is a movie that, despite its surrealism, has a more realistic sense of stalkers.
Right.
Yeah.
True. Good point.
So another great 90s movie. I think when you consider how many years after Sleepless in Seattle it was, it's enough time for that character to make the change too.
It would also not shock me if his sax skills were more avant-garde because of a lack of actual technical technique. So it all works. This is all me saying that I approve of this.
Cool. Well, thank you.
All right, I'm going to round us off. So the last we see of Annie, she and Sam and Jonah are riding that elevator down 106 flights, presumably to start the rest of their lives together happily ever after. Not so fast. It turns out, unfortunately, it only takes a day or two for Annie and Sam to realize that perhaps they were drunk on the belief that destiny was bringing them together. They're actually quite different people, even though there are some small things that do bond them. And before leaving NYC to head back to their respective homes, the two of them mutually decide it's probably not going to work out. Somewhat crestfallen and realizing that she threw Walter away for the chance with Sam, Annie licks her wounds and decides it's time for a real change now. Realizing her association with Sam, now something of a public figure, might make things difficult for her, she changes her name to Louise. She sorts out her Baltimore residence and stays in the NYC area, pivoting from journalism into law. After some years in law school, she starts a pretty successful career. And look, Louise, is still fairly young, still good looking, and she finds a new Mr. Right in a man named Ian. Their marriage starts off strong, but the passion fades over time. And 13 years in, Louise discovers that Ian is having an affair with a younger woman named Sarah and is about to leave her. In a fit of rage, Louise throws a potted plant at Ian's head and knocks him unconscious. Louise takes this opportunity to tie up the incapacitated Ian, and when he comes to, Louise explains that she will keep him tied up until they can rekindle their spark, and that Ian agree not to leave her for Sarah. This is a wild move, perhaps only the kind of thing that you ever see work in the movies, but not a completely surprising one, as Louise, when she went by the name Annie, did of course throw her life away to fulfill a romantic daydream. Who knows, maybe this time her dramatic gesture will yield a better lasting result.
I don't think I know this.
Same here.
Have you guys ever seen a movie called Serious Moonlight?
No.
I've never even heard of this movie.
This is a movie that I saw randomly, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. It is not a good movie. It is written by Adrian Shelley, who's best known for Waitress.
Okay.
I don't know. This is like a weird movie, but I tell you, this is the only movie that came to mind when I was thinking of unlikely. I mean, there's a lot of other connections we can make, but for whatever reason, this one jumped out. Serious Moonlight. I don't recommend it, but I like it as a continuation of Annie's story.
I like it as a continuation because Annie does unhinged things in this movie. And it sounds like she does unhinged things in that movie.
Exactly. Yes, she does.
Well,
we did it.
Yeah.
We did it, but this episode is not over because it's episode 100.
Yes, that's true. One of the things I posed to you all was to highlight a favorite representative moment of our time recording for this podcast. So I'd be curious to ask you guys first, maybe what you settled on for this.
So in the course of preparing for this episode and considering the milestone that it is and retrospective things to do, we edit our own episodes. We listen to ourselves frequently. When you are part of the creation of a podcast, it can result in this feeling that as you go through the motions over time, you kind of, you know what you're doing. So you feel there's a kind of an illusion of constant awareness, but time goes on and some of those episodes grow more distant from us. So I decided to go a little further back in our catalog. And so there were 4 that I went to. The first one that I went back to, and these are in reverse chronological order, was Wag the Dog.
Oh, yeah.
Which, in light of all of the discussions we've had about satires since then, I thought was an important moment to go back to. Then the second episode I returned to, partially for simple reasons of contemporary relevance, was I Saw the TV Glow.
Yeah.
Because Jane Schoenbrunn has a new movie out, Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. I've seen it. I love it. Go check it out.
Fantastic. I can't wait to see it again.
I had a great time with that episode. My friend Lily came on as our guest. And when I've heard people talk about that episode to me, I've heard it come up more than once that, some people think that we kind of nailed it with that movie. So like even if not from a big sample size, I've heard some high praise about that episode, so I had to go back to it. I think it's aged very well. I also went back to our discussion about Safe, the first in a series of Todd Haynes discussions, and to really consider what we were doing then that still held up. I think we're remarkably consistent, even though you can track some of the changes that we've done, particularly in our episode formatting since then. The things we discussed in it and also the appreciation we had back then for Todd Haynes and his body of work has grown very nicely into some of the episodes we've done since then. The last episode that I came back to revisit was our episode about Dazed and Confused.
Okay.
And I'm singling that episode out for a favorite representative moment because, and I really had to be reminded of this by listening. There was a portion, so like I think, Emilio, you edited that episode and acknowledged at the time that there was a chunk of that episode where you just didn't really touch the audio.
Oh, yeah.
Because, we just got into this great discussion of personal reflection about our own times in high school. I just got really invested listening to us have that moment. I mean, it was really a whole chunk of the conversation. For a movie about nostalgia, it was nostalgic for me. And the moment that I think, really spoke to me from that as a reflection about us is when we were talking about that car you see throughout the movie that has Mike and Cynthia and Tony.
Oh, yeah.
I acknowledged I thought Tony was the character I resonated with most in the movie. And there's a point where we're just talking about how we relate to each other and how those characters interact. And we realized we are that car.
We are that
That's
car.
us.
That is
Yeah.
us.
I think we still are that car.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would
for
agree
sure.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah. I also just think that, for an episode that we did over 2 years ago, I'm impressed at how consistent it feels with what we do now. And I feel like that was a really special moment for us, that episode.
Totally.
I'm with you on that.
I love that you also brought up the Safe episode because it is so interesting. I would be so interested to go back and listen to that episode because it was the first of our Todd Haynes conversations. And we were all like fairly new to Todd Haynes. Julian, you said plenty of times since that you didn't at that point yet have a sense of what Todd Haynes's like style and fingerprints would look like throughout his filmography. And now we've covered many Todd Haynes films. He's our most covered director. I think if you look at number of films covered, not percentage wise, but I think that that's just so cool to be able to look back at what were we like when we originally were discussing this director who came to be like kind of our shared podcast, like one of our favorite directors.
Yeah.
My representative moment, I was going back looking through all 100 episodes that we have released. It's just crazy it's crazy how long it takes to scroll back to the beginning. And the one that jumped out to me that I immediately, as soon as I scrolled past it, remembered a moment that has really stuck with me was our Adam Schlesinger episode. Because I think that whole cycle was really interesting in being able to have us tap into our sides of ourselves as musicians and music teachers. And that episode in particular, Emilio, you do a really great breakdown of the title song from That Thing You Do.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it's like very clear inspirations particularly from songs by the Beatles. So a few you shouted out was one in the intro, the descending diatonic line up until the final chord, which is pretty much straight out of Please Please Me and is also similar to Caribou by the Pixies. And then the A major major to A minor to E, like in Do You Want to Know a Secret and
Oh,
In
yeah.
My Life. And then Julian, you point out at that point the You Don't See Me also fits into this
Yeah,
progression.
right on, yeah.
And the deceptive cadence, like in P.S. I Love You. So I think it was just such a great breakdown. And the thing that I love about this moment is that we are musicians and we are music teachers. Largely, this thing that we do, that thing we do in podcasting is largely separate.
Yeah.
But sometimes we tap into the musician side or the music teacher side because it is one of the things that bonds us. It's how we have all come to know each other originally. So the times when we get to see that side of each other emerge is always a highlight for me. And I think that was one of the most effective instances of this.
Right.
Wow.
I love that you point that out because I talk to a lot of people who know me and know that I'm doing this with you guys and we all do this together. And they're like, oh, so you guys talk about music in movies. And I'm like,
we're like, no,
we
actually, we
not
don't.
normally. And
sometimes.
And it's not something that we do a lot of, but it's something that we're capable of.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that we love all facets of movies. We're not coming into wanting to do a movie podcast as we're musicians giving our spin on movies. We all have so many thoughts on movies that extend far beyond the music within them.
Right.
I think that's why we never really wanted to fully tap into that angle. But I do love when it pops up. It's very fun.
I'd also like to shout out our Paul Williams episode.
Yeah.
Because Julian, you busted out the guitar several times and the autonotone.
Which I have been going around showing that video to people. That's another one of my favorite moments. Obviously, that one is recent. But I'm like, you guys have got to see this automaton and guitar cover of Rainbow Connection because I'm like, this was not rehearsed.
No, totally not.
You guys did this together on the fly.
We didn't even really talk about it. I just knew that it was happening. And I was like, be ready with the chords. And it worked out great.
Well, we were pressed for time too, and necessity is the mother of invention.
Always, yes.
And also, while the Adam Schlesinger episode is still fresh in our minds, I want to give an additional shout out to the oft-mentioned my cousin Sylvie, who gave us the suggestion for that episode topic and has been a mainstay, if having only appeared on one episode, still a mainstay in conversation, as I put it in the past, kind of a whisperer for us. So thank you, Sylvie.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Right on. I want to echo a couple of things that have already come up. I also earmarked I Saw the TV Glow. In going back, felt like this was one of the things that I always hoped having a podcast with you guys would do, which is, number one, get me into a movie theater, potentially.
Occasionally.
Occasionally, here and there. But also introduce me to something that I don't think I would have ever seen. I'll tell you guys right now, I don't think I would have ever seen that movie if you hadn't been like, hey, I have a friend who's in a band that's prominently featuring that we should totally see this movie and we'll talk to Lily. And I absolutely love that movie. I'm fascinated by it. I think it's like one of the most interesting things that's come out in a long time. I agree. I think it's a really fun episode. I think we all come at it from different angles. I loved having Lily on. Another episode that was mentioned earlier that I feel similarly to was Safe. I feel like Safe was one of the first times where we were like, all right, this is going to be a mise en scene. We're like addressing a movie that is totally unique. We're coming into fresh. Similar to I Saw the TV Glow, Safe just like gets under your skin. A couple of other Revelation episodes I have personally felt were Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yeah.
I also loved Shallow Grave. I thought that was a really good one as well. It's not left my brain since. But those are, examples, I think, of what happens when we all get together and we can share the things that influence us and excite us. So that was really cool. And the representative moment that is just very heartwarming for me when I think about the 100 or so episodes that we've done now, I was able to bring on one of my old dear friends from high school and college, Anuvalia. And one of the things that I was just so warmed by when I was going back and editing that episode was that right away in our Not to Be Confused segment, I think it might be, for my money, the most raucous and fun Not to Be Confused segment that we've ever done. That was just more confirmation to me that I was doing this podcast with obviously very like-minded people that I think just energetically were able to bond, not just with me, but with somebody from my past, somebody that was like the kind of person I would have done a podcast with if I was doing that type of thing in high school or college. When I think of all the things that jump out, that is very close to the top for me, is our Not to Be Confused segment for Amelie
Awesome.
with a new.
Well, I mean, like I've shouted out the Not to Be Confused that I've said that I think is my personal best. It's in our Home Alone episode. Right. Listen in. I think it's well stated in the episode. But I think that in that episode, Emilio, I think that may have your greatest Not to Be Confused.
I think just the banter that came from that, from everything after, and it showed a side of everybody. There that I loved. Well, to that effect, I mean, these are smaller, but they're like, I think as well, in retrospect of some of the big laughs that I've had on this podcast. This goes to another unique episode of ours in that I think it was the one where we had the strongest outpouring of dislike for a movie, which was in the Crash and Green Book episode. Yes, yeah.
And when we were still in the Crash portion of the discussion, that there was a point where I called out a moment in the movie that weirdly kind of calls back to the divine intervention scene in Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
And then Amelia, you kind of broke all the tension of talking about that movie by saying you had in your notes, "We just witnessed a miracle and I want you to fucking acknowledge it."
That's right.
In hindsight, that moment really tickles me.
Right.
But another moment like that, and this is really on part of the whole group. I remember speaking to my mom about it after the fact, and she was very tickled by this moment too. When we talked about The Man Who Fell to Earth, and my dear friend Michaela Brady was our guest for the episode, that as we were doing Unlikely Shared Universe, that I started doing one for Rip Torn that was so blatantly obvious, and that, right as the moment I finished it, that Madeline, Michaela, and Emilio, you all in perfect unison said, "You can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball."
Yes, I remember that very well.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Emilio, you were talking about having a new one and how special that was for you. And I think we've all been able, one of the things that's fun about this podcast is that we've all been able to invite on people that are really important to us. Either people like friends that we've had for decades. Like we recently had Kelly on, who's a friend of mine since middle school, and so very similar to you and Anu. And then we've all had family members on the podcast, and those have absolutely, I think, been highlights for me. I think for you guys as well. Totally. So, and it's just really cool to bring people like that, like into this world.
Yeah. And I think about it sometimes, all the different connections that this podcast has brought together, whether it be people from our personal lives or people who we didn't previously know, who we got to connect to because of doing the podcast and have had on sometimes just once, sometimes as recurring guests. But it's really heartwarming to see that, like purely the chemistry of connection over movies can tangibly bring people together in this way. The list is very long. It's wonderful that the list is so long.
I have it here.
Yeah.
Our first guest was Anthony Hollick.
Our great friend.
Yes. Very good friend. We got Matt Friedman. We got the aforementioned Lily Desmond. Jamie Holmes. Love you, Jamie. Mike Duquette. This is all, by the way, in chronological order. Michaela Brady, Idris Goodwin, Maggie Hill, Sydney Duncan, Madeline Ziad Richard, Tara and Emily from Down the Yellow Brick Pod, Courtney Ivantosh, Rob Mitzner, Ron Peretti, Jess Laprado, Rob McClure, Sharon Rothstein, Professor Zen Zhang, Marquita Reese, Brendan McDonald, Julian's cousin Sylvie, my sister Maria Elena, Professor Michael Kramer, Sean Senavarotny, James Kodianis, Edo Choi, Anu Valia, Anna Stone, David Schwartz, Christian Garcia, Will Reynolds, Lexi Amarello, Kelly Autry, and most recently, Sarah Ungerleider.
Wow.
Impressive.
What a list.
Yeah.
Thank you
all.
All of those wonderful guests.
I didn't take a tally, but it's a long list.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you and the contributions you have brought to our episodes, to our lives as movie lovers, and just our lives in general.
They've all been a delight to have on. It's
Definitely.
been so great.
Speaking of tallies, that I'm going to just, give you a quick number. I've alluded from time to time of keeping this spreadsheet of all the movies that we've covered. And so we have covered 135 movies at this point.
Wow.
Nice.
135 for the podcast by 112 directors approximately. Granted, I have some slots in here that include pairs such as Joel and Ethan Coen or Josh and Benny Safdie. So when you add it up, it's a little more than 112. But 112 places on a spreadsheet for directors.
Yeah.
It's an impressive list we have, and there are also many films and filmmakers that we have yet to cover that I'm excited about getting to at some point. I mean, 100 episodes, we still haven't talked about Alfred Hitchcock. We still haven't talked about Fellini. We still haven't talked about Werner Herzog, Hayao Miyazaki, Michael Mann, Jane Campion, Steven Soderbergh, Tarantino, David Fincher, Terry Zwigoff, Todd Solondz, Christopher Guest, Sofia Coppola, Lynn Ramsey, Park Chan-wook, and the list goes on from there. All people I'd love to cover at some point.
Absolutely.
And, it's important with the milestone episode to acknowledge we've done a lot, and there's a lot that we still want to do.
I think there are some things coming up that we're really excited about.
Very,
yeah. Big time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We already started saying thank you, by the way, to all of our guests, and we want to reiterate that. I have a couple personal thank yous I do want to shout out really quick. I mean, it goes without saying for me, just me personally, I have to thank my wife, Elizabeth, and by extension, my son, Gabriel, because you guys have been so patient and loving with me throughout this journey and the work involved so far with this podcast. And it's like a passion thing for me, but it really means nothing without the love of my family. I think it's really important that we shout out our collective boss, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have the ability to do something that not a lot of people with podcasts do, which is we record in person.
Yeah.
Almost all the time. There are moments where we don't do that. That's totally cool.
But like more than 90 of our 100 episodes have been recorded in person.
Yeah.
And that is all because we have a boss who's a very special guy that has put together a very special school and who has been really nothing but supportive and encouraging of the fact that we hang back and do this, every so often. And so just a huge, huge, huge shout out to you, Dan.
Absolutely.
Because a huge element of what we do is just not possible without that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the fact that we met at this place of work. You guys met here when Julian was a student here himself. So this podcast literally would not exist had Dan not founded the place where we work.
Right.
Which we're still not naming, but
our boss is not Dan Smith, who
That's
will
right.
teach you guitar.
Who I think just works independently. I don't think he has like a brick and mortar school.
Yeah. And well, it's, goes to show too by what you just mentioned, Madeline, that this is years in the making.
Yeah.
Years we've been doing this, but years in it, maybe a little bit to the effect of what we see in a movie like Sleepless in Seattle. It took a lot of things coming together for this to happen. And in the course of doing this, I mean, this has been a great experience for me to enhance my analytical skills when it comes to watching movies in a way that has extended to other forms of art too. I bring the same attention to detail to music, to reading books, to seeing plays. It really is all affecting. And also, this has been a great opportunity for me to immerse myself in filmographies that I probably would have gotten to anyway, but have definitely been fast-tracked by this, whether it be Todd Haynes or John Waters or the legacy of media satires, all kinds of things. And I'm really impressed by our consistency, and here's to 100 more.
Totally. I have just a few quick personal thank yous. I want to thank Dougie for letting my preparation for this podcast take up at least half of our allotted movie slots at a given time. And then thank you to my parents for being some of our most devoted listeners. They've been listening since episode 1. They listen to every episode, oftentimes when they're driving back and forth from their home in North Carolina to New Orleans, where they spend much of their time. And to my dad for coming on this podcast multiple times, which was so special for me, and to my mom for giving him moral support and adding her own great commentary, because my mom is just as much of a cinephile as my dad and I are. Nice. So I'm just very thankful to them for being so supportive of this and continuing to listen to these episodes 100 in.
Totally.
And while we're on that, a big thank you to my parents as well, who, like yours, Madeline, were listeners from the first episode. And they have not listened to every episode because they if they're going to listen to an episode about a movie they haven't seen, they want to see it first.
Fair enough.
Which is another great form of appreciation. One that I've heard that same approach shared by certain listeners and past guests of ours too. So if we can be that kind of podcast, I think speaks very well on our behalf.
Totally. Real quick, I don't want to thank Apple, but I want to thank my laptop. Because my laptop has hung in there and recorded the audio for an overwhelming majority of these recordings. So I want to thank my MacBook Pro for hanging tough.
Thanks, Steve Jobs.
I also want to thank our M boxes, our Ambiguities. We got a Focusrite. We got an M Audio that, again, has recorded the overwhelming majority of these episodes. And the very last thing I want to say is I want to thank the two of you guys, because you guys honestly have given this podcast like everything you have, like from being prepared every time we got on mic, which I'm always just like floored by, powering through even when I feel like we didn't always have it in the tank. We record late at night. And so, sometimes strapping in for this is like finding like a reserve power bank that you didn't even know was there. Recording a podcast like this where we've done nothing but lose money to do it is an extraordinary, vulnerable process. I think we've all had to be very vulnerable with one another over the last 3+ years.
Yeah.
And you guys have never shied away from it. I think we've all just confronted anything that has come up just with love and respect and mutual adoration for the fact that we're doing this, even though, no one's forcing it on us. We just love doing it. So I just want to thank the two of you guys for going on this journey with me as we do this, because it has been very meaningful to be able to connect with people about movies. It was something I felt like I did a long time ago. And then in the pursuit of being able to do the thing that I am employed at here, I kind of gave up in a big way. And so it's been really great to get to fall back into it with such game and willing friends. And so thank you both.
I mean, thank you as well. I think we both want to say that because you are in a lot of ways kind of the de facto producer of this podcast. Yeah. You tend to be the default for a lot of things. Like, you bring the equipment, you do a lot of the setup, you are kind of the default editor until Julian and I trade off as well, but you guys do. But you edit the majority of the episodes. Like, you do edit more than we do. You are so much of like the driving force behind this, and we appreciate so much of everything that you do.
Well, it is right back at you guys for being right there with me. I've never felt at any point that we were not all pulling in the same direction, and that's huge. That's really huge.
Well, you've made for tough acts to follow here. I mean, couldn't say it all better myself. Thank you both so much. It's, it really, I'm remembering how heartwarming it was to know that all these different things I wanted to say about movies and knew I could have a platform for someday, that the feeling of finally having a place to put it out in the world, to solidify it, to make it salient.
Snug it in.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it was a gift in the past, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. Thank you both for continuing to provide it every single episode.
Right back at you.
Well, we've given ourselves some big pats on the back now. We've spent the whole episode talking about a comfort movie from the 1990s.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing quite a bit more of that in the near future. The next things that you hear from us listeners, we're going to have a little button to put on the end of our Twins and Doppelgangers episode cycle, a question that we have been asking to our guests and a compilation of their answers that we will send your way. And then when we properly usher in our new cycle of comfort movies from the 1990s, we're going to kick it off. We alluded to this in our past episode, but might as well say it again. We're going to kick it off with The Big Lebowski.
Can't wait.
One of my favorite movies of all time. Great way to follow episode 100.
Yeah, big time.
For sure.
And, we'll abide our way there.
100%. Well, in addition to this podcast, you can follow us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can subscribe to our monthly newsletter at sleeplesscinematicpod.substack.com. And of course, you can always contact us via email. We would love to hear from you. So write to us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. I'm still not on Letterboxd.
We could have done that for episode 100.
I just have to do that for episode 200. I guess.
150.
Yes, maybe. Yes. I'm not on Letterboxd. You guys are.
Yeah, you can follow me, Madeline, at Patroness of Cats.
And you can follow me, Julian, at Julian_Barthold. If you're listening to us for the first time, thank you for finding us. If this is the 9th or 10th or, come on, 100th time you've listened to us, thank you so much for sticking with us. As you are by now abundantly aware, we have really grown to love doing this, and it means the world to have our budding listenership grow.
And if you haven't already, we'd ask you, return listener, to please write a positive review and rate us on your podcast platform of choice as our 100th episode present. This is one of the best ways for new listeners to find us and help our podcast take its next steps into another 100 episodes. You can also keep it grassroots and tell a friend to tell a friend about the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast. That helps too.
Well, I never saw anyone cook potatoes like that.